Autonomy is going to do a lot of things. You know, there's autonomous systems right now that are unloading vessels and moving very large things, and I think we should look at that. Some of the most dangerous things that I did in Iraq and Afghanistan were resupply operations, and so whatever we can do to make sure that we are, you know, reducing that. We are looking at hybrid electric. When we're out just seeing the ISV, and we had an ISV heavy that actually could, that GM Defense makes, it could actually power our TOCs for 5 or 6 days. And so then you're not, you know, bringing fuel forward. That will work anywhere in the world. It certainly will work in the Pacific. And I do think we were down in Austin, and I think some others in here saw what, you know, there are systems right now that are being built, autonomous systems, the same, that are going to be much less expensive, that can still deliver wherever you're at in the world, in the maritime environment, land or air, and I think that that's where we need to be investing again. Again, that takes agile funding to make sure that we don't lock ourselves into a program and continue to buy things that maybe we won't need in a couple of years. And for a lot of things that are out in the Pacific, you see what right now what long range fires is doing, being able to operate in small teams and be able to present those kinds of things out there. It's why we're moving away with some of our systems, other drones that can actually now be employed much simpler and not from airfield. So I think long-range fires, Army's going to have a big role to play in integrated air and missile defense. And again, this is around the world. Command and control, we're used to a lot of moving parts and big formations and controlling a lot of that. So I think we're going to do a lot of that counter UAS. I mean, I could go down across all the warfighting functions. We always tell everybody that, you know, there's no such thing as a maritime, air, land. These are joint theaters, and everybody is going to be important to this fight. And so certainly we're going to be an important part of that as well. You know, what we're learning is what kind of people also and what kind of people skills we need to have inside of our formation. We had a, pretty significant meeting earlier this week about deciding how we're going to add electronic warfare operators inside our formation, how they would do that at echelon. It has informed how we need to change our training at all of our centers of excellence, how we're training majors differently, captains above, you know, and all the way up. So it's really informing everything we're doing, and it's not just the technology.
I want to welcome our witnesses and thank them both for their service to our great nation. Today we kick off our review of the administration's FY26 budget request for the Department of Defense with the United States Army. Unfortunately, we still have not received any real information about that budget request, nor have we received any detailed information on the Army's Transformation Initiative, or ATI, the Secretary-in-Chief announced over a month ago. I believe I speak for most of the members of this committee when I say that we share your goal of developing a more modern, agile, and well-equipped Army. And the broad structure of the ATI sounds encouraging. Rapidly delivering modern warfare capabilities, organizing force structure, and eliminating waste and obsolete programs. But we need to see your homework. And overall, this significance should be based on thorough assessment of requirements, and it should include a detailed blueprint of the specific changes being proposed and how the Army plans to implement them. We need those assessments and blueprints. We also need you to provide us a timeline for implementing ATI. These details will help Congress understand, evaluate, and ultimately fund your transformation efforts. The Marine Corps did well with Force Design 2030, and the Army should follow that model. At the end of the day, we want to make sure this overhaul is being driven by battlefield requirements and not by artificial budget constraints. I'm pleased to hear both of you are committed to fundamental reform of the Army acquisition processes. You will find this committee a willing partner in that effort. The battlefield is rapidly changing, but the capabilities we deliver to our warfighters are not keeping pace. Next week, we will introduce a piece of bipartisan legislation that will overhaul the acquisition process and refocus it around rapidly equipping our warfighters with modern capabilities. I look forward to working with both of you on this legislation. I also understand you both hope to use ATI to build a force more relevant to a conflict in the Pacific. While I have long supported the pivot to Asia, I urge you not to lose sight of Europe. The U.S. Army is the backbone of our presence there, and that presence matters. Thanks to President Trump's leadership, our NATO allies are finally investing more in their own defense, but Europe's rearmament won't happen overnight. Withdrawing U.S. brigades too soon would risk inviting further Russian aggression and leave our European NATO allies especially vulnerable. We cannot let that happen. Ultimately, to maintain readiness and achieve peace through strength, we must adequately fund the Army. I look forward to working with you both to build the ready, capable, and lethal fighting force America needs to deter its adversaries. And with that, I yield to my friend and colleague, the ranking member, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to our witnesses for being here today and for your service. And I substantially agree with pretty much everything the chairman just said. You know, obviously, Army transformation is the headline. And right off the bat, I've spoken with both of you about this, but I want to applaud both of you publicly for diving into that very difficult subject. It needs to be done. Now, the chairman's right. The details need to be worked out. But there is no question that the nature of warfare is changing dramatically. How do we adjust our force to meet those challenges? Certainly, we've seen, what happened with Ukraine in Russia just in the last several days, has gotten our attention about the vulnerabilities of existing systems and the capabilities of drones and new systems. How does that inform the way we want to build our national defense structure? So your efforts in that are broadly supported by this committee. Devil's in the details, but you're headed in the right direction, and we look forward to working with you to make some of those changes. And I agree with the chairman on the budget consistently given. This is the latest in my memory that a budget has ever come before Congress. Well, it's not here yet, so latest and continuing that record here as we go. But even before that, as well documented, we've been passing CRs, we haven't been doing consistent budgeting, and that adds an element of uncertainty to the challenges that we've outlined. We need a more consistent budget process. I guess the only minor quibble I would have with the chairman's comments when he said artificial budget constraints. I think the budget constraints are real. And frankly, one of the things that I would like to see within the Department of Defense and frankly throughout government is a recognition of those budget constraints. We don't have an unlimited amount of money as we are $36 trillion in debt. We're apparently about to pass a budget reconciliation bill that's going to add another $2, $3, or $4 trillion to that. We have very real budget constraints, and one of my worries across DoD, not just with the Army, is we're just sort of doing a whole lot. We don't think we have enough ships, we don't have enough nuclear weapons, we don't have enough planes, and so we've got all these plans to fill that cannot possibly be met by the budget constraints that we face. So again, I applaud the Army for taking a little bit more of a realistic look at that. And I hope we can build off of that and move forward. One other really important issue, obviously, is recruitment and quality of life. This committee did a ton of work last cycle to try to make sure that we support our service members and their families so we continue to recruit and retain the best forces we have. Also interested in your thoughts about what that force looks like in the modern battlefield. Certainly, we will always need war fighters, infantry, all of that. But technology is becoming so much more important. How does that change who we want to recruit and how we do our outreach to make sure that we have the people that we need serving in the Army and throughout the military? And lastly, I want to agree with the final point the chairman made about Europe specifically, but more broadly. I've never been a big fan of the whole pivot to Asia idea. The idea that China is our primary challenge, I agree with, but that challenge is global. It's not just in Asia. What happens in Ukraine is going to have a profound impact on how we deal with China as they are now partnering with Russia and North Korea and Iran. And also, China's active everywhere in the world. This is a global competition, so I don't think we can afford to ignore the rest of the world and thinking that if we focus in Asia, that will focus on the challenges that we meet. It needs to be a more comprehensive approach. With that, I thank the chairman for having this hearing, and I look forward to the testimony and the questions. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. I'd like to now introduce our witnesses. The Honorable Dan Driscoll, Secretary of the Army. Welcome. General Randy George, Chief of Staff of the Army. Welcome. Secretary Driscoll, we'll start with you. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members of this committee, it is a privilege to address you today. I want to express my sincere gratitude for your unwavering support of our soldiers and their families. I'd like to start off this hearing with some good news. Yesterday, the United States Army met its fiscal year 2025 recruiting goal 4 months early, welcoming more than 61,000 new recruits. These men and women are stepping up during a time of global uncertainty and complex threats. And those threats are real. When I went through my confirmation hearings, I pledged to be the Soldier's Secretary of the Army. That commitment has guided every single step of our approach so far. The Army Transformation Initiative has been conceived with the soldier in mind, and your partnership is absolutely critical as General George and I begin implementing this transformation, which is now more urgent than ever. This week, we witnessed a stark illustration of modern warfare in Ukraine and Russia. Reports indicate a coordinated strike against Russia's strategic bomber force using a swarm of over 100 inexpensive drones. At a cost of a mere tens of thousands of dollars, Ukraine inflicted billions in damage, potentially setting back Russia's bomber capabilities for years. The world saw in near real time how readily available technology can disrupt established power dynamics. And drones are but one example of a broader shift. The Army needs to keep pace. In my first 3 months as Secretary, General George and I have been immersed in understanding why the Army has been slow to innovate. Our soldiers are not the problem. I've met with them in the Middle East, Europe, along our southern border, and at installations across the United States. Their strength, dedication, and unwavering commitment to this nation are inspiring. We ask a great deal of them, and they consistently deliver. Nor is the ingenuity of American industry at fault. Our tech sector continues to thrive, driven by innovation, entrepreneurship, and a willingness to embrace risk. So, where does the problem lie? As Secretary, I have found that the Army has become calcified, having suffered from years of inefficiency, slow-moving processes, and wasteful spending. Program lobbyists and bureaucrats have overtaken the Army's ability to prioritize soldiers and warfighting. We must all work together to ensure the Army is ready to fight and win. The Army Transformation Initiative will make us into an Army that is lean, agile, and relentlessly focused on empowering its soldiers. An Army that embraces innovation, collaborates effectively with the private sector, and prioritizes warfighting readiness above all else. To achieve this vision, we must streamline our acquisitions process, reclaim our right to repair, and cultivate a culture that rewards innovation and calculated risk-taking. We must also empower those closest to the fight to actually make the decisions. The Army Transformation Initiative is our first step to achieve this vision. But this transformation hinges on your support. We are asking this committee to empower us to make these changes while providing your constitutionally mandated oversight. We are asking for the flexibility to make decisions that keep pace with the rapid advancements in technology and the evolving nature of warfare. We are asking for this committee to work with us to maximize the value of every dollar appropriated to best support our soldiers. I ask this because it is my duty, both as Secretary of the Army and as an American citizen, to ensure that every dollar the Army receives contributes to defending this great nation of ours. I know we are all committed to our soldiers, to their success, and to providing them with the overwhelming advantage they deserve. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you. General George, you're recognized.
Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to be here with you today. I want to start off by saying just how proud I am of our Army. I'm proud of our troops in the Indo-Pacific, on the southern border, in the Middle East, in Europe, and of everything our Army has done over the past year to respond to wildfires, floods, and even a bridge collapse. We have formations all around the world conducting missions and exercises and innovating with our partners and allies. When not deployed, our units are conducting tough, realistic training at their home stations and our combat training centers. Our Army is a professional team that remains focused on its warfighting mission, and young Americans want to be a part of it. And this is evidenced by our strong recruiting numbers this year. And as the Secretary mentioned, we have already met our recruiting mission for the year, and we still have our most productive months ahead of us. And while I'm proud of our Army, I also know we have work to do. We know the world is changing. Commercial technology is rapidly evolving, especially AI and autonomous systems, and this is impacting the character of war. We understand that we must transform to stay ahead of our adversaries, and we need to get better by 2026 and 2027, not by 2030. Over the last year, using existing FY24 funding, some of our units transformed in contact, which means they experimented with changing how we train, fight, man, and equip while they were deployed or in training environments. This was a great proof of concept. It confirmed that our formations are capable of rapidly improving their lethality. One transformation in contact brigade in Europe was 300% more effective in lethal targeting in training. Transformation in contact taught us some valuable lessons about what our Army should be buying and how we should be buying it, and we're just getting started. We're going to make the changes we can at our level so that we can continue to dominate the modern battlefield. For instance, we will cancel programs that are obsolete or not what our warfighters need. Develop and adapt war-winning capabilities by modular open architecture designs that can be iteratively updated. Cut and consolidate headquarters. For instance, we're going to reduce geo structure, cut 1,000 positions from the headquarters Department of the Army staff, and add modern business systems that we know will make us more effective. And finally, we will power down authorities and funding so that commanders in our fighting formations have what they need to make their teams and their communities successful. What I've learned from being in this seat is that it is our job as leaders to do what we can with the budget that we have. I've been talking about the need for agile funding for UAS, counter-UAS, and EW, and we need more flexibility in those areas. Technology is changing too rapidly. We've got to be able to buy capabilities rather than specific programs so that we can always get our warfighters the best available tech and equipment for the fight. This is where we could use your help. We are quickly approaching our Army's 250th birthday. This will defend has been our motto for 250 years, and I'm looking forward to celebrating our long legacy of duty. More importantly, our soldiers are ready today to defend our country, and we will do our part to ensure they have what they need to be successful in that enduring mission. We appreciate all of your support, and we're looking forward to your questions.
Thank you both. I recognize myself for the first set of questions. As I mentioned in my statement, the committee is willing to work with you on ATI, but we need to see your math. When can we expect the full details of exactly what you're proposing?
The way that we envision ATI and how we have described it throughout the formations is this will be an iterative process. And so there will be no one date where everything with our first batch of ATI will be completed. We will be hopefully doing what the best companies in America do and learning as we go. The very first batch of cuts that General George has referenced, where we are pushing our soldiers back out to the formations, those are in process. When we are looking at the assets that we have and what we are buying and where we don't want it, we have started to work with those companies who are providing things to empower them with the information about what we do want. So a lot of that's in process. When we're looking at our depots and where we are manufacturing things in our organic industrial base, we have just started that process of putting together the plans for what could be the right solution. But our commitment is that we will share it as soon as we have reasonable drafts with this committee to take your feedback to help make it stronger and better.
So will it be reflected in the President's FY26 budget?
Many of the cuts and the lack of requests for obsolete equipment will be reflected in that budget.
Okay. Do you expect to cancel any programs for which the money was in the FY25 CR?
We are not doing that right now, Congressman. We have been in the process of going back through with businesses things that we are doing right now, but as the Secretary mentioned, looking forward, there are several examples, and I know we've been over, and we're happy to come over and brief everyone on what we're doing with the transformation initiative in detail. But these are systems that I think we've long talked about that we know we don't need in our formation and are not going to help us win on the battlefield, and we can go down those in detail.
But those aren't in the FY25 CR then? the things that you're thinking about?
To my knowledge, Chairman, there's nothing that's in there. I mean, we just had a conversation, everything that we've, I'll give you one example. We don't want to buy Humvees, and we haven't asked to buy Humvees, but that was in our budget. And we're obviously continuing with FY25 because that's what we were directed to do with our budget.
The only reason I ask these questions, I just worry about you being locked in. If whatever you're wanting to do is not in the FY26 budget, then you may have some constraints that are unnecessary. Yes, sir.
And we worked with, in this budget creation process, we have included the entire Pentagon leadership in this, and so it should be reflected in the 26 budget.
I know you did mention the desire to have the right to repair. We want to be helpful with you on that, so do know that you need to be getting with us about exactly how you see that being constructed statutorily, and we will be helpful. As you know, the acquisition system that we have now is just antiquated and it needs to be modified. And the ranking member and I are making acquisition reform the #1 priority in this year's NDAA. What specific authorities or support do you need from Congress to fix it?
I agree with you, Chairman. One of the things that we're looking at, there's a lot of, and how we're going to look at restructuring as well, is there's a lot of commercial off-the-shelf stuff that we should be adopting. And so we should be able to be structured so that we're adopting certain equipment that we know the commercial sector is moving very fast. Other stuff we're going to have to modify. We talk about the infantry squad vehicle as one example of that. We just modify that a little bit. It's largely a commercial program. And then there's obviously develop. I think where we need the most help is in agile funding. We know that on drones, autonomous systems, EW, and specifically to the incident that in Russia that the Secretary highlighted, counter UAS, we need to be, we need to not buy, one program or record. I think program or record is kind of an old term, and we need agile funding to be able to buy in those as the technology changes, buy them the best available thing that's on the market.
Well, I agree, and we need to make those things history. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to require a culture change in the department. We are wanting to impose that culture change, but we're going to need you to want to do it too to make this system viable in the future. That I'll yield to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I completely agree on the agile funding piece. And within the budget process, it's going to be really important to have close coordination between whatever it is the president's budget winds up being and then how Congress deals with that to reflect those priorities and try to give you that agile funding. But Mr. Secretary, on the Army Transformation Plan, if you could sort of just quickly explain that. What programs are you getting rid of? What programs are you adding? I mean, we can all sort of get the idea that drones are a problem, survivability is a problem, but how does that translate into what we are going to put money into and what we're not going to put money into going forward?
I'm happy to answer it. And so basically, Army Transformation Initiative does 4 things. There are 4 buckets of actions, and then I'll circle back to the buckets to answer your specific question. The first bucket of actions is the United States Army, as General George has mentioned, has not wanted to buy a number of programs and products for the last couple of decades in some instances,
right.
and they keep getting them. And so it was basically working with the Pentagon leadership under Secretary of Defense Hegseth and President Trump to say, hey, let's do what's right for soldiers. We don't need to buy these assets and resources are limited. Let's stop.
Can you give us a couple of examples? Humvee, obviously,
Humvee is one. JLTV is one. The Booker tank is an example of kind of a sunk cost fallacy in action. We wanted to design a light tank. Great. We ended up with something that was a medium. No one really liked it. The manufacturer wasn't particularly happy with it. We weren't happy with it. What would have historically occurred there is we would have kept buying it. And what we said is we went to the leadership and we said, look, we got this one wrong. We, the Army, have to own this. The wrong answer is not to keep buying it. It's instead to stop the spending and go buy the things we want.
Exactly. So what are the things you want?
So the things we want are drones, light, attritable, commercially off the shelf. We want counter-drone technology. We want our soldiers to have a data layer. So the very basic function of war will require our people to be able to communicate over the horizon with each other, with our sensors and our things, near instantaneously. When we read about things like generative AI, that cannot work in warfare until we have a very good data layer. And so we are very optimistic that there are commercial solutions available, and we're working to do that. So that would be the second bucket. The third bucket would be right to repair, as the chairman mentioned. The Army, one of the visits we went on, it was horrifying to me that the soldiers were showing us this exquisite equipment that had been off the line for nearly a year, and they knew how to 3D print a part to it, and the part cost $2. And for 1 year, they couldn't use this equipment, and it's at scale, and we the Army, have been a bad customer to ourselves, and so there are some corrections along that. And then another thing General George mentioned in his intro is we've done a lot of these things to ourselves. We have too many people up in headquarters not wearing helmets, not out in the formations, not doing what they signed up to want to do, and so we're going to push those soldiers back out to the formation.
Just one quick thing on that maintenance question. Are you using AI for predictive maintenance to help with that piece of it as well?
We want to. We are running some experiments. So very specifically, I don't know if anyone's seen the Meta Ray-Ban glasses that are available. They're $400 or $500. We have requested, we are purchasing some of those. We're going to have our Humvee mechanics wear them and collect 1,000 hours of repair footage. And what we believe may happen is we can train a generative model so that when you're wearing those glasses, you may not actually be a Humvee mechanic, but you may be able to do 90% of the repair requirements, and so we are trying to run experiments as quickly as possible to do that.
And your fourth bucket?
Our fourth bucket is the pushing soldiers back out, getting rid of the bureaucracy in our own formation that we caused.
Okay. How does long-range fires fit into this? I know this is something that the Army's been working on, focusing on for a while. Obviously, the further you are from a target, the less vulnerable you are. Drones are an example of sort of a long-range fire in its own way. Is it just going to be drones, or are there other systems that you think are going to be necessary to be able to deliver from distance?
Sir, I was going to add, there's a couple of other things that we're looking at, on the reductions. Age 64 Deltas is another one. It's twice as expensive. We know we're moving towards autonomy. We had an RCV, which is a big, heavy autonomous system, and again, we should be looking to commercial industry to help us with that. It was, way too expensive. So there's a lot of things that are on that list. We are looking at long-range fires, and I will tell you, this is another thing where I think we have to be, get industry involved. We are getting ready to do some tests this summer with long-range missiles that are a tenth of the price. And when you start talking about magazine depth, and this is back to your initial comments on, understanding that you have a budget. I think we've all learned that we have to live within a budget. We can get things, invest in things that are much more cost effective, and I think that's where we need the flexibility to do that.
And just as I'm out of time here, I want to make that point. There are a lot of smaller companies that are developing drones, hypersonic missiles that are so much cheaper than what a lot of the programs of record that we've been working on for a while. It's just independent people who've gone out there and developed the technology, and now they've got a really cheap thing to offer. We need to really access those things if we're going to be able to deal with our budget constraints and get to where we need to be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the ranking member. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mike Rogers, for your leadership, and thank both of you for your service to our country, which is so appreciated. We're in a Cold War that we didn't choose between dictators with rule of gun invading democracies with rule of law. War Colonel Putin began this with the invasion of Ukraine, and the Chinese Communist Party continues to build itself up and expand and modernize with capabilities and rapidly expand while we are actually reacting to the changes in the battle space. This is as Iran is developing a nuclear weapon capability to achieve death to Israel, death to America. And we've seen change this weekend. And the change this weekend was indeed a victory by the people of Ukraine, eliminating Soviet bombers that had been built for the purpose of, in the Cold War, the first Cold War, to vaporize the people of America and Europe. And now those bombers are gone. What an extraordinary achievement. So we need to adapt, and you're going to find bipartisanship here. This is remarkable. Okay, I agree with Adam Smith that we need to be working together on less expensive but effective drones, and they might even be produced in Ukraine. But wherever they come from, or then they can license them here, whatever it takes. Secretary Driscoll, recently the President signed an executive order assigning the Army as the lead for deploying advanced nuclear reactors at military installations by 2028. And I see America benefits from President Trump's vision and leadership in this development. In South Carolina, with the Savannah River site that I have the opportunity to represent, and I'm the only member of Congress who's ever worked at Savannah River site, nuclear capability is very important. And with that in mind, how is the Army prioritizing micro-nuclear reactors as a national security imperative to ensure resilient, uninterrupted power for critical defense infrastructure? And over and over again, we can see that small modular reactors, microreactors will be an important opportunity. What is the status of development?
We couldn't agree more. So contested logistics is going to be, when you look at what just happened in Russia this past weekend and the ability of these cheap drones to contest logistics lines, the Army owns that and has historically owned that. And what we will need to do is, for a lot of the new tools that are coming out, directed energy, they have incredible energy requirements. You're going to have spikes of energy come through the lines that just are not set. The current technology is not sufficient for it, and we are standing up groups to run the same experiments we were talking about. We were trying to do on small nuclear and the micronuclear reactions.
I wish you well on that. Indeed, I know a perfect 310 square mile site on the East Coast, the largest secure East site on the East Coast, and it's not actually in Alabama, it's in South Carolina. And so production could be very well there. Additionally, Mr. Secretary, to better understand, I'm really grateful as a former Army Guard member myself, to understand the impact of the Army Transformation Initiative on the National Guard. In particular, the Army National Guard has 4 AH-64 Apache battalions, including the 151st Aviation Regiment in South Carolina. What do you see as occurring and about the eliminating of such squadrons? What about the divestment of the AH-64Ds and the elimination of the squadron? And maybe the general should be answering.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on that one, Congressman.
Thank you.
So I mentioned, previously when Ranking Member Smith asked the question, we are getting rid of the H-64 Deltas, expensive. What we're going to do is and we're getting rid of those battalions as well, divesting of those battalions inside the active component. The National Guard will stay with 4 Apache battalions. What you'll notice is you'll get the newest H-64 Echo aircraft. So part of this is making sure that we divest ourselves of the old, more expensive aircraft, and we're going to upgrade our fleet. And this is across all of them. Same thing with the Guard is going to see Mike models replacing Lima and Victor models on the UH-60s, and so that's what we're looking at doing.
And hey, as you divest yourself of the Apaches, a great ally of America, Jordan, would be happy to accept them. And this would actually back up another remarkable achievement, and that is the removal of the dictator Bashar al-Assad in Syria to be replaced by a government that's working in every way to have a relationship with Israel, possibly Abraham Accords, to provide stability. And one way to do that is for Jordan to be even more enhanced. I yield back.
I appreciate the gentleman from South Carolina raising the issue of nuclear power production. You may recall that last week, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth talked about not only President Trump's initiative to get more nuclear energy production in the United States, but particularly Secretary Hegseth to do some reforms in the Defense Department to help deal with our need to get off the grid. I have asked Representative Harrigan to lead the language in this year's NDA to put some pilot programs where we use SMRs on some of our bases and depots as a proof of concept. I would ask you to work with him on fashioning that legislation to make it as broad as possible, because we really would like to see this concept proved. I know it's something the Department of Energy embraces as well. With that, I will now turn to a gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Smith. You laid out the challenge that we have in working with the Army in its transformation, and we simply don't have the information that we need, and we look forward to getting that information. We will be doing an NDAA in the next month and a half to 2 months. So are you prepared to prepare us? I'll let that hang out there. A couple of things that I want to go into. On the readiness subcommittee, we are always concerned about logistics. And I want to raise the issue of logistics, particularly in Europe as well as in the Pacific. How does your Army Transformation Initiative deal with the sustainment of material supplies in the Indo-Pacific? Specifically, the APSs. Are they going to continue? What is the plan? If you don't have it, then we must continue to find out what is going to be.
I think from a high level, absolutely. ATI, the intent of it in the bucket 2 of what we need to buy, we know that we have got to spread out our pre-positioned stocks. So it is no longer going to be sufficient to have big warehouses with a lot of American equipment sitting as a target. Those will be incredibly targetable by the enemy. And what we need to do is continue to invest in and explore drone technology that can do a lot of these micro movements for us and spread out our stocks. And so I think as it specifically relates to the APS, we are trying to think about different ways to have our equipment pre-positioned around the globe and the tools that we can create with micro movements to get them into the hands of soldiers.
I would assume that micro movement, if it happens to be in the Pacific, would require the Army's vessels, maritime vessels, which seem to be continually declining in their availability. So would that be a piece of it, or are you going to give up those ships?
We are looking at that, Congressman. I mean, to your previous question, I wanted to go back. There's a lot of things. One is autonomy is going to do a lot of things. There's autonomous systems right now that are unloading vessels and moving very large things, and I think we should look at that. Some of the most dangerous things that I did in Iraq and Afghanistan were resupply operations, and so whatever we can do to make sure that we are, reducing that. We are looking at hybrid electric. When we're out just seeing the ISV, and we had an ISV heavy that actually could, that GM Defense makes, it could actually power our TOCs for 5 or 6 days. And so then you're not, bringing fuel forward. That will work anywhere in the world. It certainly will work in the Pacific. And I do think we were down in Austin, and I think some others in here saw there are systems right now that are being built, autonomous systems, the same that are going to be much less expensive, that can still deliver wherever you're at in the world, in the maritime environment, land or air, and I think that's where we need to be investing again. Again, that takes agile funding to make sure that we don't lock ourselves into a program and continue to buy things that maybe we won't need in a couple of years.
Speaking of agile funding, one of the things that the Army brought to our attention in the last 3 years was the support necessary to upgrade the barracks here within the United States and in other places, Europe as well as the Pacific. I note that about $1 billion of that money that we put together for upgrading the barracks has been agilely funded away from the barracks to be used on the border. So what about the barracks? Have you forgotten about them, or are they not important anymore?
I would say our barracks, again, having grown up in those environments, are very important to us. There are one of the things that we're working with Congress. I think that right now we are probably overpaying for some of our barracks, and we pass that on to the to the MILCON committees and kind of detail in what we're doing. When we're talking about agile funding for drones, and everything else, it's not colorless money. We want to be very specific that, hey, this is for drones, this is for EW, and this is for counter UAS, and that's where we want to make sure that money is focused.
Final 7 seconds of thought on my side is that, yes, we want to support your initiative. Very, very important to do that. At the same time, there are ongoing programs that are extremely important for the maintenance of the troops, barracks being built.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Driscoll, General George, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate your leadership. I do want to focus on the Army Transformation Initiative. Appreciate you all doing that. Well past time. This dynamic movement is absolutely needed. The challenge for us, though, is to make sure that there's certainty going forward when this does involve people's lives, when it involves uniformed service members and the civilian staffs. They deserve to know what's going on. And when they don't, it creates a high level of anxiety. I have TRADOC headquarters in my district. It's part of the Transformation Initiative along with Army Futures Command. I can tell you that the rumor mill there is running wild. There is chaos there at Fort Eustis because there's lack of certainty. We owe it to our constituents and the folks that are in our districts to give them certainty, even if it is saying it's still continuing to be under consideration. Listen, I understand what you all went through in the transformation and contact efforts there to try to figure out how you're going to organize brigades. I understand that. That's a good portion of what needs to happen in the transformation of the Army. So first of all, I want to understand, what have you learned from that you're going to translate to the ATI? Second of all, as you're going through the Transform and Contact 2.0, which is ongoing, is it fair to characterize that is going to be at least a foundational aspect of what happens with ATI? And are certain ATI decisions still under analysis? Because we got to kind of get a couple of different stories. General George, I talked with you, and you said, hey, it's definitive. It's one commanding general position, a certain number of other positions. And then we hear wild speculation about all these other things that are out there. And then on the backside, we're being told, oh, it's still under analysis. We just got to get the story straight. So anyway, I wanted to get your perspective on where we're going with ATI. How is Transforming in Contact 2.0 going to inform that? What are we doing as far as creating some certainty as to what this is going to be or what it's going to look like? I would rather, hold it back and say we're still analyzing it than putting stuff out there and saying this is what it's going to be about.
So Transformation in Contact, I think at its highest level, is taking a practice that a lot of companies in America have done that has made us an amazing nation, but particularly companies, let's say, that are venture-backed. It is part of their model. And it's this idea of doing a minimum viable product, getting into the hand of your customer as quickly as humanly possible at a very small scale, and then learning from them. And so what Transformation in Contact has done for us is it gave us lessons from the actual soldiers using the equipment that we thought might work. Some of it did, some of it didn't. We learned lessons when we sent equipment up to Alaska and it's negative 45 degrees, that equipment just didn't work. We wouldn't have known that without getting it into the hands of soldiers. And so almost all of Army Transformation Initiative has been informed by what soldiers have told us, and we expect that iterative cycle to continue, ideally long past our time in these roles, because what had happened historically, to contrast with that, was long procurement documents were created with hundreds and hundreds of requirements that then by the time the document was signed, it was already outdated technology. And then by the time it was actually fielded, it was even worse. And just what we're seeing on the battlefield, that will no longer work. And then just to your question of ATI, we hope, has many iterations within the buckets that I described earlier to your colleague. Many and most of those, we have gotten buy-in from Secretary of Defense Hegseth and the President's team to execute on those, no longer purchasing obsolete equipment, buying the new things that we need, to the merging of a lot of the things that we're going to have and pushing people out from headquarters back to the formations. That planning, we have given the order to start to make the plans. It is currently ongoing. And the moment we have it clear enough to share, we intend to.
Yeah, I just think it's critically important to communicate that in a way. I don't have any issue with making the transformation that's necessary, but these are people's lives. These are people's families. So don't forget that these are people's lives that are impacted by this, both the civilian force and the uniformed services force. They are incredible individuals that want to, to do everything they can for the nation, but, putting them through this period of uncertainty is not really fair to them. So, General George, I don't know if you have anything that you want to comment on.
I just was going to add, Congressman, we always talk about lessons. If they're, really learned, you change how you train and operate, you change how you're organized, you change how you buy things. We've talked a lot about how we buy things. How we're organized is something that we have learned. You mentioned our mobile brigade combat teams. What we also noticed all the way up is that we had redundancy in what we were doing and how we were bringing things to the warfighter. That was a problem with the Army Futures Command and TRADOC, and challenge in how we're training our people moving forward. How how quickly can you train FPV drone operators? What do you need? The other thing that we're looking at is our business systems. We are collapsing business systems from, probably by 50%, and we are going to be much more effective.
Gentleman's time's expired, Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Secretary Driscoll, thank you for being here. You have a bipartisan reputation for competence and lack of criminality, which is remarkably rare in this administration, so I hope you survive, and I thank you for your service. General George, thank you for your continued service as well. I want to associate myself with the Chairman's opening comments, namely our bipartisan support for modernization and for using the Marine Corps' Force Design 2030 as a model. General George, you and I last year had an extended conversation in the SCIF where you argued that the Army didn't need to fundamentally change in response to modern threats. I cited examples of where the Marine Corps has reduced its reliance on tanks, since we've seen $10 million tanks killed by $3,000 drones, and replacing traditional artillery with rockets and missiles. But you argued against this, maintaining that you need everything you have, both at the geostrategic level and the operational level. And now you're saying that you want to make these changes. So what has changed over the last 12 months?
I'm remembering back to that conversation, and I think that was very specific to tanks. And one of the things, I do think we still need tanks on the battlefield, Congressman. I do think that we need to update our tanks to make sure that they're basically, it's software defined. I've talked to a lot of people around the world that know that we're going to need that. That is not a capability that the Marines can provide, but that is a capability that the Army will likely, need to be able to provide if we're in that kind of situation. So,
do you still think you need exactly the same number of tanks?
No,
that you've
well,
always had?
if on ATI and what came out in our announcement is we've actually are reducing by 3 ABCTs and actually converting those units. Again, that's in the Guard. To mobile brigade combat teams, and we want to do that very quickly. Same with Stryker brigade combat teams. But I do think we're going to need armored mobile protection. What we're going through, and again, this is, and we're wanting to do this quick. This isn't about 2030. This is doing this rapidly and making sure that we can change our formations. I think since that conversation, we also have been investing in drones, putting them in our formations, investing in autonomous systems that can do breaching. I think we're still going to have to do all of those things. We're seeing all of that on the modern battlefield right now.
How does the Army's needs in the Pacific differ from those in Europe? What role will tanks play in the Pacific?
Well, I can tell you that I know that the PLA has tanks. I mean, people have tanks around the world. I think we need to be prepared with it. Again, we always talk about that.
It's great that the enemy has tanks. I'd like to kill them with our drones.
Army is a global army. I think that was brought up here earlier. We need to be ready to go.
The pacing threat is in the Pacific, right, General George?
Excuse me?
The pacing threat is in the Pacific.
No argument on the pacing threat.
Okay, then let's make sure our forces are designed to aim for the pacing threat and not continue to be calibrated to an old threat in Europe. It's great that the PLA has a lot of stuff that we don't have. I'd love to kill $1 million tanks from the PLA with $1,000 drones from the United States. Fundamentally, why is the Army 5 years behind the Marine Corps in this transformation, Secretary Driscoll?
I think one of the first things General George and I did is we went to the West Coast. We went to JBLM, went to Seattle, talked to Microsoft, went to Silicon Valley and hit OpenAI, Google.
I'm just asking, why are you so far behind the Marine Corps?
So what we saw on that visit was, I think that the United States Army had had a lot of bureaucracy that had gotten in the way of doing the right thing. And I think what we have tried to do is take the best practices from the Marine Corps' transition and try to implement those as quickly as possible.
I appreciate that. General George, on to the birthday parade where you're going to have 24 main battle tanks and 48 armored vehicles rolling down Pennsylvania Avenue as if it were North Korea, Russia, or China. What is the total cost to the unit at Fort Canaveral of moving these vehicles to and from D.C. for the parade?
Congressman, I don't know the specific cost of that one movement.
Well, I guess the total cost
right
is about
now
$35 million. So would it be safe to say about $10 million just for that movement?
I would hesitate to give you an exact number of what that movement cost. I mean, we have, I think, been very public in what it is that we expect the parade to cost overall. We are looking forward to our Army birthday next year.
Have you included damage to D.C. roads in that estimate?
We have put out an estimate of what we think everything will cost Congress.
Secretary Driscoll, you said in your opening statement that it is your responsibility to ensure that every dollar the Army receives contributes to defending this nation and for us all. How does the parade contribute to defending the nation?
Congressman, we think it's an incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to expand our recruiting pool and tell the amazing story of the United States Army and the impact that it's had on the lives
Gentleman's
of
time's
Americans.
expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, welcome. General George, you've heard me talk about this before. Army Special Operations recruiting, the 18 X-ray program. I'm concerned about a couple of specific instances where D1 athletes that I know were not allowed to participate in the 18X program because they had, in one example, it was a piece of plastic in an ankle. These are, when we're talking about athletes that are playing D1 sports, more oftentimes than not, they're going to have some type of injury. And just want to encourage that we have flexibility in that 18 X-ray program so that these people that have been able to perform at these high levels are allowed in, and that we don't have this, they call it Genesis, I call it Exodus program, kicking the very people out that we need going into our special operations forces.
Just one comment. I think yesterday, Congressman, we got an update on recruiting, and again, we can look at this on our dashboard. I think we're over 99% for
That's right.
18 X-ray for this year. So again, and we expect to get, it's a very important population for us. It's one of the 16 that the Secretary and I track in detail, so every time we get a recruiting update, I wouldn't argue, one of the conversations we also just had was how are we, we can look back into people's past much further. To your comment on making sure that, people that have been athletes, we have the waiver process and we got that, so we are definitely looking at that.
And Congressman, I would just say, what we've tried to do is, and this is back to the N10 Booker remark, we are trying to hold a mirror up, and when we are inadequate, we want to say it and we want to fix it. Our Genesis program is inadequate, our waiver program is inadequate, and we are trying to fix it.
And of all of the comments that you've made, it was refreshing to hear somebody say, hey, Army made a mistake in buying this system and we don't need it and we're going to cancel it. Because what I've seen over the last several years that I've been in Congress is we're going to spend whatever it takes to make a system work that in many cases we don't need. And I think if you look at the bureaucracy that surrounded the purchase of a 9mm pistol, where it took 10 years to pick a pistol, which is a fine pistol, but the majority of the Special Forces teams that are able to pick their own weapon pick one that was readily available 10 years ago. And they blame that on Congress, by the way, when ultimately it was the bureaucracy in the Pentagon and the purchasing requirements that led to that.
Yes, sir. I mean, we've been incredibly risk averse as a United States Army. When General George and I talk about it, there's something called the Calabrese paradox, which is basically this idea that humans are willing to take on risk for extra utility or happiness and joy. And we, the United States Army, have done the opposite of that, and we have done a very poor job of being more risk-loving than our civilian counterparts.
I agree with you. So let's talk about it from the counter-drone investments. We know how to build them. We know how to, we've watched the Ukrainians do what they can do with them. We've watched what they can do with the Russians. How do you envision the investment in the counter-drone measures moving forward with the private sector?
So this is one of the things we talk about a lot, and a lot of the technology needs to be scaled to figure out what is the right place on the cost curve in order to shoot something down. And back to generative AI, the ability to process all of this data and information really quickly to figure out, should you fire a 50 cal round at it or a $4 million exquisite defense tool? We, the United States Army, are incredibly wealthy, but that is a hard portion. And so what we're trying to do is develop solutions all along the cost curve.
So I'm down to about a minute, but my vision on counter-drone doesn't involve taking it down with a projectile as much as it involves spectrum and other things that disrupt its ability to reach its target.
It's going to be a combination of those things, Congressman. I mean, to the Secretary's point, when you're looking at cost curve and you're looking at a bullet, and it's cheap to do that, and you may use other systems like we have a laser that can identify where to shoot that one particular bullet. So I think it's going to be a combination. We are looking at EW. There's obviously power challenges with that. We are looking at high power microwave. We are looking at EW. And just like we're talking about transforming in contact, we're getting it forward, testing it everywhere that we can. We have a very big exercise in Europe called Flytrap that's this month and next that we are having industry as being
I'm
a part
down
of
to
that.
5 seconds. I respect both of you. I do hope we're also looking at the Israeli laser system that they have put in place and the potential to bring that into the U.S.
Great. I would point out that we help pay for the research and development on that laser research.
Then we should get a good deal.
We are going to get a good deal, but Israel is doing some phenomenal work on that iron beam technology. With that, I'll recognize the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both witnesses for being here this morning. I just want to, again, follow up briefly about the comments the chair made about the budget process that's here. I mean, as we sit here today on June 4th, we're less than 4 months away from the start of the fiscal year. And my staff actually did do some digging. And if the budget was submitted today, which it hasn't been, that would still by itself be the latest budget submission in history. And certainly in modern history as far as the budget process. You know, the chair, I think, described very well that this committee is straining at the leash to get going in terms of getting a mark for NDAA. And I know the appropriators are trying to sort of cobble together some type of appropriation process, but you're kind of shadow boxing at this point without a budget. And again, the two of you are not the decision makers in terms of that final release. But again, I just think we have to continue to publicly pound away at the fact that the OMB's got to get moving and get that document. I mean, we're doomed at this point in terms of avoiding a CR. It seems pretty clear at this point, and that doesn't help anybody in terms of the mission that you're trying to carry out. Again, I just really, Mr. Driscoll, I have just a quick question regarding the FLRA program, which again went through an excruciating process, and you know the decision's been made, and it's time to obviously move out in terms of that helicopter program. Again, the optimistic estimates are 2028 for delivery. You know, I think some of the more other guarded predictions are 2030. In the meantime, I mean, Blackhawks are still, you know, carrying out their mission. There was in last year's budget requests for about 24, I believe, units in that program. And again, I think that at the time FLRA was awarded, it was pretty clear it was going to be a mix of the two in terms of that. And I just wanted to get your thoughts in terms of where you see that sort of formula today.
Yeah, so great question, Congressman. So FLRA is an incredible example, I think, of the Army getting in its own way. The first demo or prototype or exhibitor was flown in 2018. Everybody loved it. And we're sitting here in 2025 without one. There's no other way to describe that than a failure. I think from where we sit today, what General George and I have said to the FLRA manufacturers is this is an incredible opportunity to show America's might, America's strength, our ability to build things quickly. We need this asset and we need it now. And so we did a call last week with the CEOs of the vast majority of the subcomponents. And what we are trying to do is set a stretch goal to have the first one roll off the line in 1 year. I don't know that we will hit it, but we are going to do our darndest to try to show that we can do things quickly as a nation again. I think to your question on Blackhawks, nearly everything we are talking about in ATI and with our purchasing goals is we believe that we are over-indexed on exquisite, slower pieces of equipment, and what we have to do is design things that will pull us more towards some balance. That balance will have autonomy, so FLRA could be flown autonomously. Blackhawks today cannot. We don't know what the right mix is, but we do know that we are just over-indexed on these other things. And so I think the work of this committee and us will be to have productive and tension-filled conversations about where that right balance is going forward.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman lead yields back. Chair, and I recognize General Lead from New York, Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. Secretary Driscoll, thank you for your service to our country, particularly your service in my district at Fort Drum. You're well aware of Fort Drum's strategic importance and modernization efforts for the Army and how vital they are for our nation's readiness. Nearly every facet of the Wheeler-Sac Army Airfield has been modernized to support a rapid deployment force, and the airfield's 10,000-foot runway can accommodate any aircraft in the U.S. Air Force inventory, matching DoD's air defense capabilities to threats and deterring our enemies. Today, Fort Drum's Wheeler-Sac Army Airfield has, unfortunately, a failing electric power system, and it's currently programmed for funding for FY27. I reached out to you via a letter about the importance of this issue, and I would just like your commitment to work with us about potentially moving up that critical funding to FY26.
Congresswoman, I deployed from that runway, so I know it well. I commit that we will take a look at it and follow back up with your office.
Thank you so much. Fort Drum has relied on energy from the local power grid since closing its on-post energy facility in 2023. This is an issue my office has been engaged in for a number of years. The Army Corps of Engineers determined that a small modular reactor would be an optimal option to supply Fort Drum's energy needs. This is an issue that I worked with my colleague, Congresswoman Tenney, who shares Jefferson County with me in terms of representation. I would just like your commitment today to work with our offices to ensure Fort Drum returns to energy independence and security, including the potential deployment of this small modular reactor to the installation as soon as possible.
Same answer, Congresswoman. I commit we'll look at it and follow up quickly.
And then lastly, in a previous NDAA, my office worked to secure a provision that required DoD to review their ability to conduct electronic warfare training and leverage this defense ecosystem in upstate New York that we have helped develop between Fort Drum and the Air Force Research Lab in Rome, New York, which I also represent. This has been an ideal environment, and it led to the Army's decision to choose Fort Drum to host the second multi-domain task force in 2025 and the PEO IEWNS's incredible work to partner with AFRL's Future Flag series of limited experimentation, which we strongly supported and has led to great tactical outcomes. Can you speak to the importance of placing as much of the second multi-domain task force at Fort Drum as possible to leverage this unique experimentation that will be continued between Rome and all the great work we're doing there? Either?
I'll jump in on that one, Congresswoman. First, I think we did the big exercise last November.
Yes.
Up there. So I'm really proud of what 10th Mountain has been one of our most deployed units anywhere in the Army, and they're doing a phenomenal job right now. General Nauman down on the border. I think what we're looking at is that every installation is going to have to do what we've started to do, that you have helped with up at Drum. We're going to have to be able to train EW. We're going to have to be able to train drones and working through that. So we're going to have to expand all of those systems, and we're certainly looking on the stationing. We can come over and talk to you about that in detail right now. I don't know if we've made any changes or finalized any of that, but happy to come over and walk you through that in detail.
I appreciate that.
This is something to do.
Yes, I appreciate that. This is something my office has advocated for a number of years, to develop this defense ecosystem specifically in upstate New York because of our unique capabilities, because of both Fort Drum, but also the emerging technology research that's being conducted at Rome AFRL. I also want to invite you, Secretary Driscoll, to come back to Fort Drum. I've hosted the president there where he signed an NDAA. I've hosted previous secretaries of defense. I've hosted previous secretaries of the Army, and I would love to host and welcome you back to Fort Drum.
It would be an absolute honor. My XO, who was working with me when I got into office, just went up there, and so I would be delighted to visit her with you.
Great, thank you. I'll take you up on that and yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Army is fighting an internal battle with trying to balance modernization efforts with current needs. It seems that the Army would like to modernize, but the system is slow to change. General George, what do you see as the Army's most important asset?
I would say it's our people, Congressman. Without a doubt, number one for us, and where we have to consistently focus. Is why we're so pleased with what we're doing with recruiting, and why we're focused as we are on making sure that we are also adapting them. We're proud of what they're doing. We're getting a great group in.
Thank you. Great answer. I agree with you. In your testimony, you mentioned that you are investing in installations, including prioritizing barracks. It was recently reported that $1 billion of funding meant for barrack renovations is being redirected to the mission at the southern border. Will taking funding away from the barracks delay the timeline in which they are upgraded? And do you think postponing these types of renovations will have an impact on the morale and retention?
First, I just want to mention the retention word kind of triggered me here. I think at 6 months in, we met our retention goals for this year as well. So we're doing very well with retention. Of course, we want to continue to improve our barracks, and we're going to continue to do that. We've talked about that a lot. I do think that that's another area we can probably spend our money better. In that, there's a lot of restrictions that we have as far as how our costs are like 68% higher than what you would get outside the gate. We are looking at, we've done 3D printing, and that's happened down in Texas, of barracks that I think we can provide great systems. Beyond that, I think what we're looking at holistically is that every installation is different, and every installation has different requirements. When I was up at Lewis, very different than it is at Bragg, and so that's where we're trying to be very.
General, I appreciate the extensive response, but will redirecting $1 billion impact the ability to do the renovations at the barracks? Well, it's just a yes or no answer.
Obviously, redirecting has an impact. You have to make choices, Congressman.
So the answer is yes.
If we took $1 billion out of barracks, we would be able to fix less barracks.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
And Congressman, this is an issue that
It's okay. I'll get to you. I got the answer I was looking for.
Sorry.
Secretary Driscoll, I assume you are aware of a parade coming up celebrating the birthday, which coincides with another interesting birthday. The estimated cost of this is $45 million. It is interesting. It is an interesting time to spend $45 million on a parade when all the services are subject to an 8% budget cut. If Congress wrote the Army a $45 million blank check, do you think you could find a better way to spend that money than a parade? And could $45 million deliver any quality of life improvements or capabilities that the warfighters need?
Congressman, very sincerely, I think we as the United States have an amazing opportunity to tell a story of an institution that is older than our country itself. It is an institution.
I understand.
And I believe very specifically that telling that story will directly lead to a recruiting boom that will fill up our pipeline for the coming years. And I believe when our marketing budget we would spend to recruit those soldiers, I think our team believes that the investment of these dollars to tell that story will directly lead to a good, measurable, quantitative outcome for the Army.
So you're looking at this as a recruitment tool.
Yes, Congressman.
And you think it's better spent there than supporting the quality of life for warfighters?
Congressman, I think we have to spend on both, as General George said. I mean, we run our budget. We have to make these hard decisions all the time. I think it would be a massive tragedy to let this moment pass where we can tell this story and inculcate an entire generation of youth into this amazing story that is the United States Army.
I find that very interesting, but thank you. The Army is touting a total change to the force via deliberate information transformation, and acquisition reform. General George, are these efforts actually coming to fruition, and can they be scaled to the level that you are expecting without interruptions to the service members?
Actually, all the feedback that I get, Congressman, everywhere we go is that we need to do this faster, that we need to transform faster. I mean, the challenge is, kind of the question back is, can we do this back up here? We do need to stop buying obsolete equipment. We're going to need to make the changes.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Dr. Desjardins.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you both for being here today. Going to deviate from my original questions just to touch on drones, considering what happened in Ukraine. I was just recently at Oak Ridge Y-12 this past week and looking at the facility there and all the other facilities around the country that are critical to protect. has the Army stepped up its posture any in response to the threat from drones? I know domestically we have domestic terrorism acts. We know abroad we get attacked at our bases in the Middle East. What is the rules of engagement on the military bases and high-risk sites such as our nuclear production sites?
So first, I think you'll see, Congressman, that this is an area that we are very focused on, that we need to spend more money on. Again, I would describe it as a capability portfolio where we don't need one system. I was kind of explaining that earlier. It's going to be a broad base of things that we need to do. How we're going to do that in a combat zone is very different than how we would do that in the States. Obviously, doing that in the States, and we're working obviously with Northcom. You're talking about FAA, FCC, with everything else that's going on, and so we're continually working through that. There is legislation, on that as far as the 130I, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that I think we need to make some changes to, and we are, working with Northcom, Joint Staff, and OSD. To get that up. But we are very focused on this, and as I mentioned, we're doing a very large exercise in this with all kinds of industry and everybody this month and next.
Yeah. And you showed us some examples of that when a large group of us visited you in Austin. And in your opening statement, I found it striking how far focused the Army has been on procurement and adaptability. As we've seen, the modern battlefield has undergone rapid changes over the past few years. And because of this, the need to procure things better, faster, cheaper, and more reliable has become critically important as we work to keep our warfighters equipped for success. This has been something that the committee has been laser focused on under the leadership of Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith for this year's NDAA. So, General George, what have been some of the most notable successes or lessons learned from the Transformation in Contract initiative that can help this committee enable our military to become a more lethal and agile force?
I could go on a long time about this, Congressman. I think we have this last rotation that we had close to 400 drones in it down at the Joint Readiness Training Center. So obviously, infusing them with technology, drones, autonomous systems, counter UAS, what we're doing to change the network. The Secretary mentioned that this is about being data-centric and being able to pass all these systems moving. A lot of it, though, we're learning from the modern battlefield is changing how you train and operate, understanding how that you can be viewed. There's really nowhere to hide. And all of what we are doing right now is changing our organizational construct as well, because we're going to have to be more dispersed, more mobile, and we're working through all of those. And we've made a lot of those changes. We just now need to scale those changes across the Army, and that's what ATI will help us do.
And Congressman, I think the way General George and I talk about this is this paradigm shift between software and hardware. We have created hardware that has required software to function. We need our new hardware systems to basically be software-led and just the software manifesting in the world as this hardware, because if we can't update these systems in near real time, the enemy is going to be able to disable them, and we're taking that into account in every decision we're making.
And if you can, both of you, in 1 minute, we've been working with the Army and in the past, General Thurgood, to address the persistent manning shortfall across our Patriot battalions. While there's been progress, there's still major challenges that remain as we start to stand up Golden Dome and try to figure out what that looks like. How is that going? What are you doing to manage that and get us in a better position? 30 seconds.
So we're doing really well on ADA folks that are coming into our formation. So we're pleased with that, and we're going to continue to keep the gas, or keep the foot on the pedal on that. The other thing is the technology is looking at how we can use technology to reduce the manning inside these formations, and we put some new equipment out, and we're happy to come over and talk to you about that as well.
Okay, I'd love to have an update. Thank you both. Yield.
The gentleman yields. Ms. Houlihan is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. It's nice to see you again, General, and I really look forward to getting to know you a little bit better and appreciate the the idea that you have brought with you a spirit of bipartisanship. That's something that's really important here. And speaking of bipartisanship, I have a couple of questions that I hope you might be able to help me with. Recently, we decided to make sure that there were gender-neutral fitness tests, and we implemented those, and it's something that I have been supportive of since I've been here in Congress. I was hoping that I might be able to get you, Secretary, and you, General, your opinions on whether or not you can indeed commit that women will continue to be allowed to be Rangers, will continue to be allowed in the infantry, and continue to be allowed to be trained for those particular positions.
Congresswoman, I'll hand it to General George just so he can confirm what I'm about to say, which is my 7-year-old daughter, Lila, she wants to join the Army since I've been here, and I hope that she gets to try out. And if she can maintain the excellent standard to join those types of units, and she wants to, I hope she has the opportunity to. I have not been part of, and I don't believe General George has, a single conversation that has made me believe that a man or a woman that can meet those standards of excellence, that they wouldn't have those opportunities.
General?
And I don't know if you've heard, I agree, we've not had any discussion about this. There's probably a podcast that I can share with you where a lot of our, soldiers, female soldiers were out there talking about the changes in this, and that was a lot of the feedback that I got inside this as well. So they're very happy with the standards and where they're going, and they're doing very well in our units. And I would also tell you is that we've also recruited more female soldiers into the Army over this last year as well.
So effectively, you are both committing that women will continue to be allowed to be trained in those particular positions.
As far as I know, Congresswoman, we have not had any conversation.
And there is actually a reason I'm asking, because there are conversations above you that this indeed will end up being at threat. And I really want to make sure that I hold you to that commitment, because if people meet the standards, they meet the standards. My next question has to do with something that Mr. Garamendi touched on. I spent a lot of time, as you know, on quality of life issues bipartisanly with Representative Bacon. And one of those pieces of legislation that we were able to get through was for barracks improvement, to make it possible that we were able to fund and improve the barracks. Mr. Garamendi mentioned, and it is true, that $1 billion for barracks improvement has been moved to the border, which would seem to be counter to the law that we literally just passed. When Mr. Garamendi asked it, both of you seem to not be aware of that particular movement. Would you be able to check into that for me? Because it seems as though that this is really, really important and literally counter against the law.
We can follow back up with you, Congresswoman. I just want to echo what General George said earlier. These issues matter deeply to us. General George is currently a soldier. I was. My daughter is named after a current soldier's daughter. They live in Army and military housing. I care deeply about this population, and so we commit to following back.
I do as well, having grown up in a military family and served in the military myself. I very much think that where you live really, really matters to your quality of life. And it is not about This is about color of money issues, and it seems to me that there is no way that we should be allowed to move $1 billion worth of money from barracks that we've worked so hard to give you into something like the border. I'm going to move on with what's left of my question. General George, you talked about recruiting, and as Secretary, you did as well, and that you've met the recruiting goals, and I think that's terrific and very much worthy of the applause that I think that you got bipartisanly on this. But would you be able to also confirm that this momentum is also attributable to the past years and the past administration in the future soldier preparatory organization and effort that we've had in streamlining entrance processes, in refining waivers, medical waivers, in recruiting and training stronger recruiters? Will you be able to confirm that this is a long time coming and not something that just happened over the last several months?
Congresswoman, I went down and visited the Future Soldier Prep Course at Fort Jackson, and it very sincerely, there have been a couple of moments in this job that have just touched my soul. Seeing the soldiers and how that is, the soldiers who go to that have a why wall about basically how they need to overcome their challenges to join the Army. The outcomes for those soldiers has been great, and that has been a spectacular program.
That has been conducted over the last couple of years, as well as the medical waivers, as well as getting better recruiters. Am I correct?
Correct.
Thank you. I have very little time left, so unfortunately I will have to ask this last question for the record, which, General, has to do with the 1,000 layoffs that are in the headquarters, and who are they, and how we're going to be accommodating for that. Thank you. I yield.
The gentlelady's time's expired. Major General Kelly is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start with, what is the most important asset that the Army has? It's one word.
People.
There you go.
Soldiers.
All right. Esprit de corps, heraldry, all those things, are they an important part of a unit in recruiting and keeping people and retaining?
It's crucial, Congressman.
Okay, and we do twilight tattoos. The Navy does a thing where they have the Marine Corps and ships on the deck out on the American coast. Is a parade important for esprit de corps?
We do a lot of these across the country. I mean, with Golden Knights, so I say yes, all of this, and also there's a lot of.
I bet we will have a Army birthday celebration next week right here in the Capitol and numerous other places to celebrate our history and heraldry. Is that correct?
That's correct, and the planning, Congressman, started years ago.
And as an ROTC cadet, they did CALFAX exercises to get us to want to be on tanks or fly helicopters or see artillery fire or see A-10s come in. Those are an important part of recruiting and retention, right?
Yes, sir.
So this parade kind of matters to recruiting and retention and heraldry and all those things, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. I want to talk a little bit. We talk about diverting the money, but safe neighborhoods matter too, right? And not housing people who are not here legally in Army barracks, that matters, right?
A safe border is incredibly important, Congressman.
Absolutely, and not housing people who shouldn't be on Army bases, on Army bases, and putting at risk our warriors, that matters too, right?
Everything related to that border, Congressman.
So I want to talk a bit of bureaucracy. Okay, you got a 3D printer who just built some buildings at Bliss. Do you think urinal flows go to the strength and reliability of a building? Urinal flows. And the answer is no. Okay, we literally slowed down production and did extra testing because we had to test urinal flows. That would apply to every building, not just 3D printed, right?
There are a lot of challenges, I think, Congressman, with how we're building buildings compared to outside, and we've been, over on the Hill trying to, explain what those are.
I would just suggest when people put false things in there to make requirements longer, that we probably find them another job or no job. When you want to do hurricane strength testing in the desert, I would suggest that's not the best use of our people or our assets. I want to go a little bit, General George, and I'm really concerned about this, and Mr. Secretary. I hear us talking about moving AH-64 Echo models, and I hear that we're going to the Mike model in UH-60s. What I want to make sure that we're not doing now is that we field one thing on the active component and the lesser alternative, the secondary, the old strategic reserve thing to the National Guard and Reserve. It matters when we fight. We do not have a large enough Army to fight. We have to all fight at one time or be prepared to. Do y'all agree with that?
I agree, and I just want to explain on the details. Actually, there are some reductions of the 64 deltas in the active component so that we can also have H-64 Echoes in the Guard in Compo 2. And so that's what the National Guard is going to see from Army Transformation Initiative is the age of their, they'll get much younger, much more capable aircraft out of what we're doing with it.
Thank you, General. And I want to go real quick. One of our members earlier brought up, let me tell you, in World War II, did we fight a very different campaign in the Pacific than we fought in Europe?
Yes.
One was intensively sea warfare and air warfare, some ground forces, but it was primarily sea and air. Is that correct?
I would actually tell you that we had 21 divisions and 6 corps in the Pacific during World War II. So I don't see our job is to be ready anywhere in the world.
But ground forces, my point is ground forces still matter in Europe. That was a primarily ground war. It uses all, both use all.
I think they matter everywhere. So, I'm obviously biased, but I think history supports that, and infused with the right technology that we would have with drones and counter-UAS and all those things, I think the Army is critically important. Long-range fires
we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can be prepared for Europe and the Pacific is kind of my point. The final thing is just I want to make sure you guys continue our commitment. I think one of our most valuable tools is our state partnership programs, and I think we are using it well. I think we can use it better to get more return on investment for the Army and the nation as a whole. With that, I yield back.
Joel, time's expired. Mr. Crow, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to both of you for coming in. I join with many of my colleagues in sharing some excitement around you thinking big and structurally. This Army Transformation Initiative is the way we need to be thinking. But I also join with my colleagues in saying that congressional engagement is extremely important, and without information, this committee cannot do its work. In addition to this committee, the Army Caucus has not had any engagement with the department. I'm the co-chair of the Army Caucus. We're 6 months into this year. This is a bipartisan caucus. This is a group of members of Congress who, many of whom are Army veterans, many of whom have Army facilities in their district. They volunteer, and there just hasn't been any engagement. We are some of your biggest allies, and we can't do that work unless we engage with you. Both of you are combat veterans like me, and I would like to talk about our shared experience in combat. Secretary Driscoll, you led a platoon in Iraq, and I'm sure you realize while you were doing that engaging with civilian populations was important, correct?
Absolutely, Congressman. And just to your Army Caucus, we will remedy that. That's shame on me for not having you. So
thank you.
I commit to you'll get an invite soon.
Appreciate it.
And then yes.
Thank you. So engaging with the populations, that's essential to the mission because we're almost always operating near civilians, correct?
Correct.
And we can't accomplish military missions, combat missions, unless we effectively interface with civilian populations, correct?
That is generally true.
And as part of that, reducing civilian casualties, making sure that civilians are not pulled into or are injured as part of our operations is also mission essential, correct?
The Army, we always aspire to minimize and mitigate that risk.
It would be mission essential, though, to minimize civilian casualties, right?
Yes.
General George, would you share that view?
I would also come back to, with our shared experiences that, we have to really focus on making sure that every soldier is really good at their kinetic mission. And before I went to Afghanistan as a brigade commander, Iraq as a battalion commander, as a field grade, we were focused on that.
Yeah.
Part of everything that we do with what we're doing with targeting is making sure that we are very precise in what we're doing. And I think, history would show we are very precise. I mean, it's combat.
Which I agree with, General. I mean, the precision is really important, right? Because that actually makes us more combat effective to be precise and to make sure we're hitting what we need to hit and not hitting other things, in addition to losing the support of a civilian population, of which we are oftentimes trying to earn their support by reducing casualties. Is that accurate?
I would say in certain situations, if that's a counterinsurgency fight, then that would be
accurate.
Certainly.
In fact, the mission analysis tool, METTC, you both are familiar with METTC, right? In fact, you used it, Secretary Driscoll, when you were in the military, right?
Yes.
And the C stands for what?
Civilian?
Yes. It's civil considerations, right? So it's actually built into our analysis planning tool that you think about civilian population. So here's my question. In fiscal year 2023, this committee, on a bipartisan basis, created the Civilian Protection Center of Excellence for all the reasons we talked about. That we understand that we can't effectively conduct our mission, win the support of local populations, reduce civilian casualties, and ensure the effectiveness and the precision of our targeting unless we make it a part of the mission and we focus on it. The department has provided notice to Congress that they are going to defund and get rid of the CPCOE. So why, on a bipartisan basis, we passed something that will help put our soldiers in a position of being more successful in our mission, more precise in our targeting, that will be better at protecting the civilian populations that we serve in and alongside of. Are you going to wind this down?
I would tell you, Congressman, that what we need to do is make sure that beyond the center of excellence is embedded in everything we do from top to bottom. I think you were mentioning MET-TC. That's a very tactical thing that we're doing at every place, all the way up. We're doing this when we...
I agree with you, General.
So
I'm going to cut you off. I agree with you. Secretary Driscoll, this was the way to focus and prioritize this effort. Why wind it down?
I think we are aligned in your goal, Congressman, and we think there's a more effective way to do it.
All right. Well, I want to hear that more effective way, and I would like answers to that.
Yes, Congressman.
Thank you. The gentleman's time expired. I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes. Thank you both for being here. I appreciate your leadership. I want to echo some of the concerns that we've heard today, bipartisan concerns on the news reports that the Secretary of Defense is moving over $1 billion out of barracks and dorms for the border. We need a strong border. I get that. But I spent the last year chairing a subcommittee or a temporary subcommittee looking at quality of life. And in the midst of that, the GAO came out and gave our dorms and our barracks a failing grade, an F, to include the Army's. We saw pictures of raw sewage in dorms, rodents, mold, dorms that had, and barracks that had no air conditioning or heat working, and on and on. And so we spent the year trying to build a plan to help the services fix this. And what we did learn is over a decade, the services were moving money out of their dorms and barracks towards weapon systems. I get that. We had finite resources. But we built a 10-year hole in our dorms and barracks. And now, if the news reports are true, it's very troubling. We were trying to help with the quality of life, and I feel like a decision was made that undermined this whole effort that we spent the last year doing. So I wanted to say that for the record. General George, I think China's rightfully the pacing threat. What is it that you want the Army to bring in a China-U.S. fight? What's the main capabilities that you see the Army bringing?
I think the Army is going to be, Congressman, the backbone for a lot of things that are out in the Pacific. You see what right now what long-range fires is doing, being able to operate in small teams and be able to present those kinds of things out there. It's why we're moving away with some of our systems. Other drones that can actually now be employed much simpler and not from airfield. So I think long-range fires, Army's going to have a big role to play in integrated air and missile defense. And again, this is around the world. Command and control, we're used to a lot of moving parts and big formations and controlling a lot of that. So I think we're going to do a lot of that. Counter UAS. I mean, I could go down across all the warfighting functions. We always tell everybody that there's no such thing as a maritime, air, land. These are joint theaters, and everybody is going to be important to this fight. And so certainly we're going to be an important part of that as well.
Thank you. I totally agree. Long-range fires. I think some criticisms towards the Army about if they put the right priority on air defense, but I think we know we need it now, and we need to really invest in this area, particularly in a Far East conflict, and also the counter-drone technology is going to be huge. There's a lot of reports of what China's doing with their drone technology, so we will be facing the same threats that we're seeing in Europe right now. To you both, sometimes I hear the President or Vice President, Secretary of Defense talk about solely China as the primary threat, but I don't hear a lot of talk about Russia. And yet, since 1991, Russia's forcibly changed their borders 9 times. And we're seeing the big one right now with Ukraine. Would you agree that Russia is indeed a threat, 1? And 2, are we going to maintain our posture in Eastern Europe with the Baltic countries, Poland, Romania? I think our presence there is critical for deterrence.
I think we all agree, and we're following the leadership and guidance of Secretary Hegseth, that China is the pacing threat. But when General George and I talk about the Army that we believe we are responsible to build, one of the things we've referenced is that often most human beings that thought they could predict the future have turned out to be wrong since the beginning of mankind, and we want an Army that can be effective anywhere that we send it. And so in all of our planning, we try to build an Army that it stands by and stands ready to go anywhere the President sends us. But yes,
so is Russia a threat?
Russia is a threat.
Thank you. General George.
I would agree with that, and I just want to this gets to some of the earlier questions about what kind of equipment. I don't think that we can have an Army that is only good at one thing. The Army has to be, our country expects it of us, and I know we can do that, and that's exactly what we're focused on with the Transformation Initiative.
Do we plan on keeping our presence in the Baltics and in Poland? You'll die, the one of you.
Yeah, I've not seen any, policy decisions on that right now, Congressman.
I can't think of better allies. These folks love our country. I've been to Baltics many times and Poland. They love freedom. They know what it's like to live under the Soviet Union or Russian control. They are investing 4% roughly of their GDP, trying to go to 5%. They're great allies, and I just hope we stick by their side and make it very clear. With that,
and Congressman, I was in Poland and saw how they treat our soldiers, and it's incredible. They are an amazing ally,
Thank you.
And we support them.
With that, I yield, and I recognize Mr. Ryan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for being here. Thank you also for coming to the finest service academy in the world, in my district, for commencement 2 weeks ago. It was really an honor to have you both there, and I think we can all agree the country should be incredibly proud of those 1,002 young men and women that raised their right hand that day, and certainly appreciate both of you being there and your leadership to that effect. 2 areas that I wanted to hit, starting with you, General George. I just want to commend you on the record for, from the beginning of you taking this critical role, saying we're going to really take hard critical looks, we're going to up our risk tolerance, we're going to experiment with the transformation in contact initiative that you undertook, and then to see that come to fruition and taking those lessons learned from those, I think it was 3 brigades that were doing that work across the country to then inform the transformation initiative that we're talking about today. I think that deserves significant praise and credit as a model that I think all the services should look at. Can you just briefly talk about one specific success story? And I know you mentioned, for example, that 300% increase in lethality of the 1 brigade, but can you share, I think a lot of us are focused on the kind of the macro. There's a lot of moving pieces here, but can you bring that to life? Is there an anecdote or a story you can share from the transformation and contact that's informed the larger ATI initiative?
I mean, even before, I'll go back to the people because I've been asked what's our most important asset. I think, what we're learning is what kind of people also and what kind of people skills we need to have inside of our formation. We had a, pretty significant meeting earlier this week about deciding how we're going to add electronic warfare operators inside our formation, how they would do that at echelon. It has informed how we need to change our training at all of our centers of excellence, how we're training majors differently, captains above, and all the way up. So it's really informing everything we're doing, and it's not just the technology.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a very critical point and leads actually to my second question, which is about our greatest resource, our personnel and recruiting specifically. Secretary Driscoll, appreciated your op-ed and the broad recognition of a huge success. And I think everybody in the committee should be applauding in a bipartisan way the success of the Army after several years of investment, a strategy change, particularly led by you, General George, and your team, bipartisan work of the Congress under the chairman's leadership and the ranking members, specifically Rep. Houlihan and Congressman Bacon's effort on the Quality of Life Initiative to raise pay and address other critical quality of life issues, all of that coming together to actually work to see us hitting our goal, not only on time, but ahead of time. So I commend you all for that. I do think it's important that this not be a political analysis of the success. And I'm concerned, not actually from either of you, but what I've heard from the Secretary and the President of overly politicizing the takeaways of the recruiting success. So I just want to raise a few points and ask a few questions to make sure I'm understanding how we got here correctly so that we can learn the correct lessons and build on this success. I know in FY22 and 23 we were challenged, did not hit our numbers. That's correct, Chief?
That's correct.
And then in FY24, which to be clear happened in the last administration, just we hit our goals. We're up 12.5% and exceeded the goal, which and hit 55,150 recruits in FY24. Is that right, General George?
That sounds right, yes, sir.
And then I think we even went 11,000 over, and we're able to put 11,000 additional folks into the delayed entry program, which fed into the success we've had in FY25. Is that the right way to think about that?
Everybody that goes into the delayed entry program, and that's exactly what we're going to do, Congressman,
For next year.
From here on out, is
Right.
we expect to get, 20,000, for example, in the delayed entry program moving forward.
Great, and I'm running out of time, and we'll submit this for the record. But I think it's important to highlight that this all started under your leadership, General George, and the last secretary in October 2023, when we added 1,200 recruiters. To your credit, when we started the Future Soldier Prep course, which 24% of the recruits came from that course. When we moved to online job boards, when we went back to the old motto that we all love, be all you can be, and a lot of other smart initiatives that started in 2023.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, gentlemen. Have either one of you heard of the 1st Battalion, 158th Aviation Regiment of the 11th Expeditionary Combat Aviation Brigade?
I'm familiar with not that specific battalion, but the ECAB. Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary?
Directionally, not specifically.
That's unfortunate because it's being decommissioned, and it's in my district. And I want one of you two to tell me why that's happening. Because I would hope, since that's being decommissioned, and Mr. Crow said it very eloquently, we can be your greatest asset or your worst enemy. And you've come into my house, where I was born and raised in this county, and you're taking something away from me, and I want to know why.
We went through, and we've done a lot of war games, Congressman, on what we need for aviation structure. And so that's what we went down from start to finish on what we were going to do. I think we've talked a lot this morning about autonomous systems.
You did speak about
and what that's gonna
modernization.
change.
I'm curious why you wouldn't try to modernize that unit instead of decommissioning it. I say decommission because I'm a Navy, guys. There's a different term in the Army. Please let me know.
Well, again, I think when you're overstructured on a specific asset and you're under investing in others, you have to make decisions on that. That's what we are looking to do with a lot of those pilots that are in Compo 3 is they will, we're working right now with them that they would move and they would fly in the Guard. We got a lot of talent in there that will go with the Guard or potentially with Compo 1. But again, what we have committed ourselves to is that we're not going to keep equipment that we don't need, systems that we don't need when we know we need to invest.
If we don't need those particular weapon systems or those air assets, why can't we increase the capability by moving more modern aircraft to that location?
Again, I think we're going to, over the years, going to start to see a reduction in what we're having for some of our rotary wing aircraft, and we can talk about how much rotary wing aircraft has been used right on the front lines. In some of these, it's less. We are moving towards the MV-75, which is the Flora that the Secretary was talking about in the future here, and we're hoping to move that very quickly. But I think that there are other missions, autonomous systems, that can do that. And again, we had to make a decision. We did not. We were overstructured on that particular aviation.
Well, I'd like you guys to take a harder look at this, and let me tell you why. Because Conroe, Texas is just right outside of Houston. And that area is basically the catcher's mitt for hurricanes in the state, okay, out of the Gulf. And the 500 soldiers and the 100 civilians that work at that unit are engaged in our community. We see them every day. And when Harvey hit and every other storm that followed Harvey, that asset was flying overhead, rescuing my constituents day after day. Continue to do so without question. And I'm getting the call not from them, but from my district. And I can assure you, when my district starts chewing on me, guess where I'm coming? And I want those answers. I respectfully request either one of you come to my office and explain to me in detail why this is happening, why we can't move assets in this place, why can't this particular unit stay, not only because of its deployability and how great they are every time they go overseas, but because of the asset and what they bring when we get hit by a storm every single year. Now, if you do take that from us, and I'm going to speak hypothetically here, if you do take this from us, and this goes away, and I've heard 12 to 24 months once you pull the trigger. If that happens and we get hit again, which we will, you're going to have to explain to me.
And Congressman, we'd be happy to come to your office and explain it. The first bucket of